Emily Carter didn't expect a small moment to shake her the way it did. But that Thursday evening in Seattle carried a heaviness she couldn't ignore. The rain tapped steadily against the windows of their modest townhouse, filling the room with a quiet rhythm that usually calmed her. But tonight, it only made her feel the distance between her and her husband. She stood near the window with a warm mug in her hands, looking out at the blurred streetlights, pretending she was lost in thought. But she wasn't really thinking about the weather or work. She was thinking about why her marriage felt like it had shifted without warning. She sensed Daniel behind her before he made a sound, a soft awareness that traveled up her spine. She didn't turn around right away, not because she didn't want to see him, but because she knew what she would find those quiet, searching eyes he thought she didn't notice. For weeks now, he'd been watching her in these small, almost invisible ways, the kind of looks people give when they're trying to understand something they're afraid to ask out loud. It wasn't the cold, suspicious kind of watching. It was tender, almost fragile, as if he was trying to remember the shape of something that once came easy between them. She finally glanced over her shoulder and caught the tail end of that look, the one filled with unspoken longing and confusion. That was the part that unsettled her. She wasn't used to being the one observed so carefully. They had been drifting apart, not with arguments or dramatic moments, but with simple, missed connections, late meetings, quick meals, promises of next weekend that never came. Yet there he was, watching her as if she still held every answer he needed. It made her heart twist, because she didn't know what he wanted to ask, and she wasn't sure if she had the courage to hear it. Emily turned back toward the window, trying to steady herself, and that was when her phone buzzed on the counter beside her. She didn't rush to grab it, but the name that lit up the screen froze her in place. Chase, a name she hadn't seen in years. Someone from a different chapter of her life. One she had tucked away quietly and respectfully once she chose her future with Daniel. She didn't touch the phone, but she felt Daniel's attention sharpen behind her. Not in suspicion, but in concern. He always noticed when her body stiffened like that. She wished he hadn't noticed this time. The air shifted, almost as if the room held its breath with her. She told herself not to read too much into it. It was just a message. People from the past reached out sometimes. It didn't mean anything. But the timing felt strange, like life was rearranging pieces she didn't ask it to move. She tried to keep her hands steady as she picked up the phone and flipped it over so the screen faced the counter, blocking the glow. The message stayed unread, yet her heartbeat felt louder than the rain. Daniel spoke softly from the couch, a simple, "Everything okay?" And even though he meant it as a casual check-in, it carried worry she hadn't heard from him in a long time. She answered with a quick, "Yeah." But the lie sat between them with too much weight. She didn't want him to think there was something wrong. Yet she couldn't hide how shaken she felt. The problem wasn't the message itself. It was the reminder of a part of her life she had completely closed off. She wondered why it decided to return now, right when she and Daniel were trying to find their way back to each other without even realizing they were trying. He didn't ask anything else, but she could feel him watching her again. Not invasively, not possessively, just carefully. He had grown quieter lately, more observant, as if he was trying to solve a puzzle he didn't have all the pieces to. And now she felt herself becoming a puzzle too. One she didn't know how to explain. The room felt smaller, filled with things left unsaid. Emily walked away from the window and set her mug down, needing something solid to ground herself. She glanced briefly at Daniel, noticing things she had forgotten to look at: the tired curve of his shoulders, the way he held his hands together when he was unsure, the soft crease in his forehead that only showed up when something bothered him. She wondered how long he had been carrying those little signs unnoticed by her. She wondered if he felt as lonely in their shared space as she sometimes did. But before she could ask, before she could start a real conversation, the moment passed. Daniel looked away at the TV screen, pretending to focus on a game he wasn't watching. She stayed quiet, pretending the message had already slipped from her mind. But it hadn't, and neither had his look. That night, Emily lay in bed, staring at the ceiling long after Daniel's breathing settled into a tired rhythm beside her. She kept thinking about the way he had watched her earlier, Not out of ownership, but out of quiet fear and love mixed together. And she kept thinking about how one unexpected message from the past could change the balance of everything, even if she didn't want it to. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew one thing for certain. The moment she had caught Daniel watching her had opened a door inside her, one that would not close again so easily. Emily couldn't shake the message from Chase, though she told herself it was just a name from the past, nothing more. Yet it kept replaying in her mind like a sudden note in a familiar song. She tried to focus on her work the next morning, but every click of the keyboard felt hollow. Every email she typed seemed distant because her thoughts kept drifting to that simple ping on her phone. Daniel had left for work earlier, giving her a quiet house that felt both comforting and heavy. She sat on the kitchen stool, her coffee growing cold, and couldn't help noticing how much she had changed over the years, how much Daniel had changed, and how the small things she used to overlook now felt larger, more urgent. She remembered the night before, the way he had watched her without touching her or speaking, like he was trying to memorize a face he feared might disappear, and the thought of it made her chest tighten. When she glanced at her phone again, the message from Chase glared at her. Simple, harmless, but full of unspoken questions and possibilities, and she realized she wasn't sure how to feel. Part of her wanted to respond, to reconnect with a piece of her younger life, but part of her felt loyal, bound to the life she had built with Daniel, to the quiet rhythm of their home and the history they shared. She didn't respond, but just seeing his name brought a storm of memories. Laughter from college, long walks, late-night talks. A life that existed before Daniel. Before responsibility and routine shaped her days. Daniel had noticed the subtle change in her energy, even from a distance. That morning, he called briefly, asking her if she was okay, and even over the phone. Emily could feel the concern in his voice, gentle and steady, but carrying a worry he couldn't quite hide. She smiled softly and assured him she was fine, but her tone betrayed her because she wasn't fine. The tension she tried to hide was like water pooling quietly under a floorboard. It wasn't obvious, but it existed, and he could sense it. By the time she finished her morning tasks, she was drawn to the living room, where she caught herself imagining Daniel in the couch chair, the way he had watched her the night before. She remembered every detail, every subtle expression. The way his eyes had softened at the corners, the slight furrow of his brows, the way he seemed to hesitate before speaking. She felt a sudden longing to reach out to him, to tell him that she had seen, that she had felt, that his quiet attention had not gone unnoticed. For a moment, she wondered if he realized that his small, careful observation had stirred something unexpected inside her, something that had been dormant under the weight of routine and the small cracks that had appeared in their relationship. She realized she wanted to return the gaze, to show him that she noticed him too, not just physically, but in the deep, quiet way that makes people feel remembered, seen, and loved. The day moved fast, chores and errands keeping her distracted, but her mind kept drifting to what she had seen in Daniel's eyes, and then back to Chase's message. The contrast of the two men, one from her past, full of nostalgia and possibility. The other, her husband, full of history and familiarity, pulled at her heart in ways she hadn't expected. She felt a twinge of guilt for thinking of her life with Chase, and a wave of longing for the simple moments she and Daniel had lost somewhere in the shuffle of work, stress, and daily life. She began to see all the little things she had missed. The way Daniel's hand lingered on the doorknob. The small sigh he let out after a long day. The way he tried to make her laugh even when he was exhausted. The subtle ways he communicated love without words. Suddenly, it struck her how much she had been watching him too, without realizing it. She had been so preoccupied with her own thoughts that she hadn't noticed how tired he looked. How careful he had become in his actions, how much effort he put into maintaining the life they shared. She realized that watching him, truly watching him, was different from any curiosity or nostalgia she had felt before. It was about seeing the person she loved again, beyond routine, beyond expectations, beyond years of familiarity that sometimes blurred together. Later, when Daniel returned home, Emily felt a strange tension in the air. a mix of anticipation and fear, as if both of them were aware of a silent conversation happening without words. He seemed quieter than usual, hesitant in his movements, almost cautious, like he wanted to speak but wasn't sure how to begin. She noticed it immediately, the subtle shift in his demeanor. And a small part of her felt that same surge she had felt the night before, the pull of intimacy, the recognition of the love that had always existed but had been buried under unspoken worries and distractions. She tried to act casual, but he caught the look in her eyes, that soft awareness that said she knew something had changed inside her. Something was stirring between them, and he didn't need words to understand. They moved through the evening, with a careful rhythm, each noticing the small gestures of the other. The way hands brushed against cups, the way a glance lingered just a moment too long, the way smiles appeared unprompted. Emily's heart raced in a quiet, controlled way, sensing the undercurrent of emotions flowing between them. Understanding for the first time in weeks that Daniel's silence was not distance, was concern. It was care. It was his own version of longing. When the night came and the city lights reflected softly against the rain-soaked windows, Emily sat on the couch across from him, feeling a mixture of anticipation and hesitation. She realized that she was no longer only the one being watched. She was watching too, noticing every nuance, every small expression, every breath he took. She understood now that love wasn't only about presence or words. It was about attention, about noticing the parts of someone's soul that others might miss, about understanding when the other person was struggling and offering silent companionship. And even though Chase's message still lingered in the back of her mind, she understood that the most important thing right now was this: the way she and Daniel were starting to see each other again. Carefully, tenderly, fully. The evening ended with a quiet promise neither spoke aloud. A shared understanding that they were still here, still connected, and that watching each other with care could be the first step toward finding their way back to the closeness they had both missed. Emily woke up the next morning with a strange clarity, a sense that something had shifted between her and Daniel, a quiet awareness that she hadn't felt in weeks. The sun spilled through the blinds, soft and warm. And for a moment she just watched it, savoring the stillness before the day began. Her mind, however, immediately went to Daniel, to the way he had looked at her the night before, the way his eyes lingered with a mixture of worry, love, and something she hadn't seen in a long time, a quiet vulnerability. She realized she had been so caught up in her own worries, the message from Chase, the weight of work and life, that she hadn't really been paying attention to him. But now, sitting at the kitchen table with her mug of coffee, she found herself observing him without realizing it. Noticing the subtle curve of his shoulders, the tension in his jaw, the way he sighed softly while getting ready for the day. It was not the kind of observation driven by curiosity or suspicion. It was different, deeper, tender in a way that made her heart ache with a mix of longing and relief. She saw all the little ways he carried the weight of their life, how carefully he moved, how deliberate his gestures were, and she felt a sudden pull to reach out, to show him she had noticed, to bridge the small distance that had grown between them. She realized she had been blind to his small signs of fatigue, to the quiet moments when he had been carrying his own burdens silently. And now that she saw him, really saw him, the connection she thought had been fading seemed to spark alive again. Later that morning, as Daniel prepared breakfast, Emily kept stealing glances, memorizing the way his hands worked over the countertop, the focus in his eyes as he poured coffee, the slight hesitation before he spoke. She felt a strange mix of emotions, admiration, love, a little guilt for letting so much time pass without noticing him. But mostly, she felt a quiet excitement, a rediscovery. She realized that for weeks she had been consumed by everything else, by the past, by messages and memories that didn't matter, while Daniel had been right there, consistent, present, and still watching her, even when she didn't know he was. She wanted to speak, to tell him how much she noticed, how much she cared, but she held back, sensing that the moment needed to come naturally. That words alone could not capture the emotions that had built quietly between them, she realized. That love wasn't always spoken aloud. That sometimes the act of noticing, of truly seeing, could be as intimate as any declaration. And she felt her heart swell with a sense of hope she hadn't expected that morning. She watched him move around the kitchen, small habits and gestures that had become invisible over the years, now glowing with a new significance, and she felt herself falling in love with him again. In small, quiet moments, one glance at a time, the day moved on quickly, errands and work filling the hours. But Emily kept noticing Daniel in her mind, replaying the subtle things she had seen and felt that morning. She thought about the way he had watched her the previous night, the gentleness in his attention, and realized that his silent care had always been there, even when life had made it easy to forget. She wondered how many times he had held his thoughts, how many times he had noticed her without saying anything. And she felt both gratitude and a sudden determination to reciprocate, to show him she was aware, that she understood, and that she was ready to bridge the quiet distance that had grown. That afternoon, she found herself imagining the conversations they could have, the simple gestures of attention she could give, the shared glances that could replace the long stretches of distracted silence. She began to understand that this was a turning point, a moment in which she could choose to fully see him and be fully seen. To reclaim the emotional closeness they had both been missing without even realizing it. The idea both thrilled and frightened her, because intimacy, even after years together, required vulnerability, but she felt ready, more than she had in months. Because the observation itself had reminded her of what truly mattered. When Daniel returned home, Emily could feel a subtle tension in the air, a quiet anticipation, as if both of them were aware that something was different now. That the careful watching and noticing had changed the unspoken dynamic between them. He seemed lighter, more cautious in his movements, almost hesitant, like he wanted to test the waters of this new awareness. And she noticed every detail, from the slight smile he tried to hide to the way he carried his bag a little slower than May. As you know, he went to his bag a little slower than May. I seemed lighter, more cautious in his movements, almost hesitant. I'm like what I see. Like I see, like my sevenness. Like they see, unquote, my sebity I see. I see, FAW, FFAT, KY, Sevtiv 5, Kiktai, Gaev, Sevay, Kai can Kai to King Kif to see me, we you to see, we get you to you, I can you to see, can we to go, to clad, it, I could do it quick, if to you in with I edit guy with you, I used to attack cake if you get it, daddy, I would make usual, as if trying to prolong the moment before stepping fully back into their shared life. Emily found herself drawn to him, not because she needed reassurance, but because she wanted to show him that she had noticed, that she had been paying attention, that she was present in the same way he had been all along. They moved through the evening in quiet, almost sacred synchronization, exchanging glances and gestures that said more than words could. It's a kind of language built from years of history, now resurfacing with renewed meaning. She caught herself observing him across the room, taking in the way he relaxed into the familiar environment, the subtle signs of care in his movements, and realized that watching him fully and deliberately gave her a sense of closeness she hadn't felt in a long time. It's a sense of intimacy that had nothing to do with grand declarations and everything to do with quiet attention. By the time the night settled in, Emily understood that this mutual observation, this new awareness of one another, was transforming their relationship. She had been the one being watched, but now she was watching him with equal care, equal affection, and equal recognition of the quiet love they shared. In noticing him, truly noticing him, she felt the old warmth return. The kind of connection that doesn't require words but thrives in the understanding of each other's presence. The subtleties of movement, the small expressions that speak volumes. Emily realized that this was not just a temporary moment. It was the start of something deeper, a deliberate choice to see each other again, fully to reclaim the intimacy they had let slip away in the busy hum of life. And as she watched him, finally settle on the couch, relaxing in her presence, she knew that this was only the beginning, the first step in a journey back to each other, where observation, care, and love intertwined, forming the foundation for everything they had, almost forgotten but now remembered. The evening settled over the Carters' home with a quiet weight, a sense that something unspoken was about to surface. Emily had been watching Daniel all day, noticing the smallest gestures, the way he moved, the way his eyes flicked toward her even when he thought she wasn't paying attention. There was a tension she couldn't ignore, a sense that both of them were on the edge of acknowledgement, holding back words they had been carrying for far too long. Earlier that day, she had discovered the small envelope tucked into his laptop bag, her name written in his familiar handwriting. Her hands trembled slightly as she held it, and for a moment she simply stared at it, unsure whether to open it or leave it where it was. Daniel entered the room, catching sight of the envelope in her hands, and froze. His eyes widened just slightly, and she could see the flash of fear in them. The worry that she might misinterpret something, or worse, that she might reject what he had written. Emily felt a sudden rush of emotions: anticipation, curiosity, love, and a little fear herself. She wanted to know, yet she also wanted to let him take the first step, to see how vulnerable he could allow himself to be.